Hey everybody, Andy Evans with Columbus Wired coming at you live here with the Ohio State Purdue pregame preview show. Now, I didn't make the trip to West Lafayette, hence why I'm doing it within the friendly confines here of my humble abode in Columbus, Ohio. But we've got a big one on our hands tonight as the second-ranked undefeated Ohio State Buckeyes at 7-0 overall, 4-0 in the Big Ten, travel west to take on an upstart 3-3 Purdue team who is 2-1 right now in conference play. Now, why do I say upstart? Because the Purdue Boilermakers have won their last 3 games after losing the first 3 games of the season. But of those 3 games that they lost to begin the year, by a total of 8 points. Yeah, I know there was that wacky last-second field goal that they allowed Eastern Michigan to kick in Ross-Ade Stadium to complete the loss. But Coach Jeff Brom, along with quarterback David Blau, they've done a great job of regrouping and really coming with a great game plan, which has now produced the second most efficient and best passing offense in the entire conference. Second, of course, to the Ohio State Buckeyes, led by redshirt sophomore Dwayne Haskins, who has been throwing his way into the record books so far this season. Now, a ton of superlatives. I'm going to get to some of those stats here in a second. But first of all, I'm going to lead off with this. And I'm not going to be saying anything that I'm sure everybody out there hasn't already heard. But for the sake of this show, I'm going to go ahead and say it anyways. Since 2000, the Buckeyes are 3-4 against the Purdue Boilermakers in West Lafayette. Now, the only team that has beaten Ohio State more times overall, regardless of whether it's been on the road or at home, has been Penn State. They've gotten 5 wins over the Buckeyes since 2000. However, of those 5 wins, 3 have come in Happy Valley. There's one other team that can say that they've beaten Ohio State as many times as Purdue, and that's the Wisconsin Badgers, who have 4 victories over Ohio State since 2000. However, 3 of those wins have come in Madison. Therefore, Purdue is the only team in the entire conference that can say since 2000 they've beaten Ohio State more times in their own stadium than any other team in the conference. Can you believe that? So safe to say, the Buckeyes, they're probably going to have a Donnybrook on their hands tonight. In fact, they bring the they bring the second longest win streak in FBS right now at 12 games, which is behind Central Florida's 19. And of course, we all remember when that win streak started. It was after the Iowa game last year in Iowa City, a game that a lot of people out there were saying was going to be a trap game. Kind of smells like this could be a trap game tonight too, huh? And I tell you what, if the Buckeyes aren't careful, they could find themselves with an L. Because, like I said, top 2 passing offenses in the country. Right now, Ohio State, number 1 ranked team in the conference. And I just said the top 2 passing offenses in the country. I meant in the conference. Ohio State right now, number 1 ranked passing offense in the Big Ten. Total offense, scoring offense. However, their rushing game, a little bit lackluster. We'll get into that in a minute. But the Buckeyes not only tops in the conference, they're one of the best, most prolific passing offenses in the country. 3rd in passing offense, 3rd in pass efficiency, 2nd in total offense, and 6th overall in scoring offense at 46 points per game. And of course, Dwayne Haskins, the man who has gotten it done for them. Right now, 3rd overall in the country in passing yards at 2,331. He's 3rd in the country in efficiency at a 188. 4th in yards per game with 333. And he's 5th in total offense at 340 yards per game. So there you go. He's averaging 7 yards rushing per game on the ground. To put that into perspective, though, okay, all those stats I just threw out, which I know your mind's probably swimming right now, and you probably can't remember half of what I said. Hell, I don't even remember half of what I just said. But to put that into perspective, the last guy to win a Heisman at Ohio State was Troy Smith in 2006. We all remember the year he had, an unbelievable season that was unfortunately upended at the very end of the year by an Urban Meyer-led Florida team in the national championship. But Troy finished that year with 2,542 passing yards, 30 touchdown passes, and 6 interceptions. And up until this past weekend against Minnesota, well, actually, up until 2 weekends ago, against both Indiana and Minnesota, there was only one guy in Ohio State history that had thrown for over 400 yards in a single game. That was Art Schlichter against Florida State in 1981. As a senior, Art threw for still what stands today, single game record, 458 yards. However, Dwayne came out against Indiana 2 weeks ago, threw for 455, came within 4 yards of beating Art's record. And then he followed it up with another 400-yard game, I believe 412, last weekend against Minnesota. So here's a guy now, redshirt sophomore season, first year starting, and he's done it within the first 7 games of his career to become the only quarterback in Ohio State history to throw for over 400 yards in a single game twice in the same career. So suffice it to say, Dwayne Haskins, he's been slinging the ball. He's been slinging the rock. But that's led to a lot of contention among Buckeye fans with the running game. Right now, Buckeyes, like I said, 7th in the conference running the football. And why haven't they been able to run the football? I mean, you've got 2 guys in the backfield who have had over 1,000-yard rushing seasons. In fact, J.K. Dobbins, true sophomore, he broke the single-season true freshman rushing record last season with 1,403 yards. Mike Weber, we remember, ran for a little over 1,000 there in 2016 in his redshirt freshman season. But take this into consideration, okay? Now, I'm going to take an outlier out of these stats. I've taken J.T. Barrett's rushing stats from last season out, all right? And I'm only looking at both J.K. Dobbins and Mike Weber's stats from last year compared to this year. So far this season, both Dobbins and Weber have combined for 968 yards and 7 touchdowns on the ground. Last season, by the 7th game of the year, they had combined for a little over 1,002. So really, Mike Weber and J.K. Dobbins, they're on pace to replicate what they both ran for last season to possibly do again this season. Now, I get it. The last 2 games, they've been in a funk. Failed to rush for over 100 yards in the game. Didn't score any rushing touchdowns. In fact, last weekend against Minnesota was the 3rd time this season that this rushing game has failed to run for over 100 yards and put the ball into the end zone. But nonetheless, I still got faith that these guys can get it done. But what about the Boilermakers, all right? Like I said, 2nd-ranked passing offense in the Big Ten. They're 2nd, actually, to Ohio State in total offense. They're 4th in the Big Ten right now in scoring offense. And like I said, David Blau has had a great season. He's 2nd to Haskins right now in pass efficiency at a 160. He's 3rd in total yards a game with 290. And he's thrown 10 passing touchdowns and only 2 interceptions. Now, I know that may pale in comparison to Dwayne's 28 passing touchdowns, but he has thrown 2 less picks than Mr. Haskins, who's thrown 4 so far in the season. And as we've all seen, I know, Ohio State, they've been subjective to giving up the big play this year. Right now, the Buckeyes' total defense ranking 8th in the conference at 369 yards a game, which is 3 spots better, actually, than the Boilermakers, who have been giving up almost 415 yards per game. The Buckeyes and Boilermakers are right in the middle, smack dab in the meat of the conference when it comes to both rushing offense and rushing defense. Ohio State currently sitting at 7th in both categories in the Big Ten, averaging 185 yards on the ground rushing, while Purdue comes in right behind them at 179 yards a game on the ground. Defensively, the Buckeyes once again smack dab in the middle of the conference against the run, giving up 148 yards a game, with the Boilermakers just slightly ahead of them in that category with just under 147 yards per game given up. But as stated earlier, top 2 passing offenses in the conference, so I'm sure both teams are going to be gearing up to create as much havoc in the passing game as possible. Ohio State, much like their rush defense, is 7th in the Big Ten against the pass, giving up 221 yards a game. Purdue is 11th. Passing defense, giving up 267 yards a game through the air. But one thing that both teams can honestly kind of hang their hat on is this, bend but don't break mentality. Ohio State right now 3rd in the conference in scoring defense at 19 points a game. Boilermakers are 7th at 23 points a game. Now, I know that stat really probably doesn't jump out at you. Okay, yeah, 7th in the conference, allowing 23 points a game, but their defense right now has picked off more passes than they've allowed touchdowns, 8-7, whereas the Buckeyes have swallowed up 6 balls for picks, and they've allowed 8 passing scores. And I just realized I said swallowed up 6 balls for picks, so it's too late now. We're live, and we're going to go ahead and keep it. Here's my opinion on the game. Tonight, it is supposed to be cold. It's supposed to be windy. They're talking about 20 to 30 mile per hour winds in West Lafayette with gusts of up to 40 miles an hour. Now, that's going to be right around when the game kicks off at 7:30. As the night goes on, it's supposed to kind of tail off a little bit, and the winds are supposed to decrease, but it's still going to be a windy game. So that may not be apropos to throwing the football, even for one of the most prolific passing offenses in the country in Ohio State, and for the second best passing offense in the Big Ten in Purdue. So are we going to finally see Ohio State's run game break out? Boy, I hope so. They've actually, you look at it, Mike Weber had a great game against Oregon State, ran for 2 or 3 scores and 187 yards. I know J.K. had over 100 yards in the TCU game there. So they can run the football. I know they can. They've just been in a funk here the last 2 games. Maybe this is finally the game where we kind of see both guys break out, maybe both run for 100 yards. At this point, the offensive line issues, which really hadn't been, there really hadn't been any issues until the last couple of games. The offensive line, though, definitely needs to tighten it up. So are we going to see a rushing game? I think we're probably going to see them finally go for over 100 yards and put the ball into the end zone at least once, maybe twice. I'm hoping to see a collective 150, maybe 175 out of both Weber and Dobbins, and a couple of scores on the ground. But I am a little concerned about this Purdue defense. And once again, I think they're going to be creating some havoc. We saw, Minnesota with Minnesota actually has a better defense than Purdue, but once again, Purdue's defensive mentality, bend, don't break, much like the Buckeyes. I think this is going to be close. Like I said, I think we've got a Donnybrook going to be playing on our hands here tonight. I think Purdue kind of comes out fast. Ohio State comes back. Let's face it, Ohio State definitely has the more talented team, at least on paper. But Jeff Brom is going to have these guys playing at a high level. Let's face it. Pretty much every game that Ohio State plays, they've got an X on their back, especially when you're undefeated and you're the second-ranked team in the country and you're vying for not only a spot in the Big Ten championship game at the end of the year, but, possibly a spot in the college football playoff. So I think Jeff Brom is going to have these guys loaded for bear. I think they're going to be ready. I think it's going to be fairly low scoring just because of the temperature, the winds. They're also talking about some rain kind of late afternoon coming around 3-4 o'clock over there, so it might make things a little sloppy. But of course, rain, wind, all that kind of stuff does bode well for trying to run the football. So I think the Buckeyes get it done. However, it's going to be close. I think you're going to see Purdue scrap and claw their way, and this might kind of be one of those deals where Purdue's got the ball down by a touchdown, driving, and the Buckeyes are going to have to try and fend them off. So my final score here, your undefeated second-ranked Ohio State Buckeyes will stay so after their matchup with the 3-3, 2-1 Purdue Boilermakers when all is said and done tonight in West Lafayette. Final score, Ohio State 30, Purdue 23. For Columbus Wired, I'm Andy Evans. Thanks for watching.